Dr. Carlo Santoro. Doctor is an associate professor at the American University in Phnom Penh, and the professor will give his presentation on the opportunities for corporations in the field of architectures and urban design in Cambodia. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody that is present today with us. Of course, the representative of the institutions, most importantly, all the Italians, the Cambodians, and everybody who loves Italy and Cambodia, of course. I will share my presentation with you in a minute. Actually, I will ask the organizers to share my presentation because somehow this is not.
Sure. 1 second. Yes, you can start.
Okay, can we move to the next slide? Okay. So certainly it will be here impossible to talk about all the opportunities that are open for whoever is involved in the field of architectural design and urban design here in Cambodia. Of course, those fields support the pillar sector of construction. And here we focus only today in one of the aspects that might foster the cooperations between, of course, the Italian professionals and the Cambodian professionals on this sector. We here consider of paramount importance the considerations on the legal frameworks that regulate the sectors and the implementations in its practice. For us, there is an important perceptions gap that we have to fill here. And we have to solve several misconceptions in how the sector is regulated here in Cambodia. And for this, we take into considerations the development of the capital, Phnom Penh, which right now it's one of the most important city, not only in Cambodia, but in the entire region, given its fast growth. If we take into considerations in the next 10 years, the city would be expected to increase from the current populations of 2 million, roughly 2 million people, to 3 million people. That means rough innovations of 100,000 people per year. So it's a very fast growth that is misconceivably considered as not regulated in its growth. We have, of course, all the instruments in place in this town, and of course for the growth of Cambodia to regulate the growth. Most importantly, for the city of Phnom Penh, the master plan that has been approved in 2015 was indeed one of the great success of the cooperations between, in this case, foreigners and French, fellow colleagues from the municipality of Paris, and the Cambodian authorities, and of course, our colleagues here in the academy. This will regulate the growth until 2035. Though this idea in practice, it's supported also by several other master plans that are, of course, the outcome of other cooperations among the professionals in the sectors. If taking in consideration, for example, the idea of the engineers from the JICA cooperations that support the JICA cooperations, we have the urban transportation master plan that will regulate the growth of the city until 2035. And in that sense, also the drainage and sewage master plan will regulate all the infrastructure underlying the roads of in that considerations, also in the regions, other possibility for cooperations are provided by countries that are not even having a strong footprint in terms of professional know-how in Cambodia for this sector, though in the region they are extremely representative. And for example, we take in considerations the Korean cooperations for the architectural sectors. And in that case, the sustainable actions fostering the cooperations between the private sector and the public sector are taken in extreme considerations in the Phnom Penh Green City Strategic Plan that has been revised several times and right now reached the latest versions that will regulate these cooperations until 2030. Next slide, please. The Phnom Penh Municipal Master Plan, and of course, it's not a regulatory framework as we intended in Italy and EU. Mostly it's intended as a guideline. Given the fast growth of the city, we cannot conceive a master plan that frees the conditions of the city in its fast growth and then not conceive an high possibility for negotiations of all the process. And also another important consideration is that the city is growing, and the majority of the city in Southeast Asia, they are growing in their urban outskirts. And therefore, the presence of the real estate construction sector, it's definitely, they're playing a strong role in the definitions of the so-called satellite cities that are defining the growth of this city. Therefore, the detailed area plans that usually are the necessary outcome of municipal master plan in Phnom Penh, they are actually considered of less important in this sector. More indeed, it's to conceive in the idea of the cooperations between the private sector and the public sector, where, of course, the consultant might play a strong role in supporting not only the local activity, but also the activity of the developers that are in consultations with the authority in defining what is indeed the growth of the city. And here, a strong cooperation can indeed be considered where the know-how from different parts of the world, and indeed, as its excellency was pointing out, always welcome here in Cambodia. Next slide. The sector is completely regulated. We have the law of constructions issue, and in 2019, we have the sub-decree of urbanizations that is considering the urban parameters that regulate the growth. And we have also the process for enabling the constructions, and therefore all the documentations are clearly indicated in the constructions permit regulations. We have also supporting regulations where, for example, the EIA process, or the environmental impact assessment process, is taken in considerations by the Ministry of Environment for the large development that are indeed implemented in the outskirts of the cities. And of course, is also the case of Phnom Penh. And recently approved, again in 2019, we have one part of the building code that is in considerations right now to the authority, and this part was indeed pulled by the Ministry of Interior for the regulations of the fire safety system. And we recently have an important joint signature between the Ministry of Land and Constructions and Eurocham, where the Eurocode is taking as a paramount important for the relations between the urban actors in regulating the constructions of the entire country. Nevertheless, it's always a field of cooperations. It's always a field of discussions and open considerations on these sectors that involve not only Europe, but involve all the urban players in the region, namely, of course, China, Indonesia, and all other important actors, one of which, for example, is incredibly important and present here with the know-how from Japan. So Italy can play a strong role here, not only in importing goods, not only in exporting goods, not only in fostering the industrial sector, but in bringing know-how, in exchange. There where our fellow colleagues, our compatriots, as architect, as engineer, can play a strong role in the definitions of these cooperations, regulations that are under development, of course, and we see, for example, we hear actually another important considerations. Cambodia went out of the war just recently, if you consider the history of a country, just 30 years. So therefore, out of that, every single regulatory framework is the output of considerations that take in place between, of course, the urban actor, but also from the know-how that comes from the region and from other countries, including European and, of course, Italians. Next slide, please. Of course, we have to understand that several misunderstandings, several frustrations happen because it's not taking in considerations the practice out of the idea that, for example, if we take in consideration the idea of the design manager that regulates usually the relations between the different actors, might be the client, might be the developers, might be the authority, might be the construction manager, might be the designers. Even these figures, if we take into consideration this idea, act as usually by textbook as a contract administrations. This is not the case. The contract administrator of the design management, which is actually one of the most important part in regulating all the cooperations and the cooperations among all the actors here, is not to be considered in Cambodia as simple administrators. And therefore, if we move to the next slide, the design manager embed in his figure as a consultant, as an idea, a sort of metaphor of what actually happened between the urban actor into the idea of this field of architectural design and urban design. Here, the important part is the center of the negotiation activities. In that case, the design manager tried to embed in his practice and in the office in which he practiced all the considerations that are the missing gap that should be filled by the different actors that play in this role. And therefore, it's not only have to have a knowledge of the project planning, the construction law, the procurement, and the risk management, actually has to assume the control. So in that sense, the know-how, when is imported from another country, has to take in considerations the idea that has to assume also these portions of controls on the framework in which he plays a role, or she plays a role if in case, of course, a colleague is a lady. But in these considerations, therefore, sometimes we hear the idea, of example, of missing codes. If we consider that idea, for example, even at the basic of our practice in the field, if we take in consideration this practice and the idea of the missing design code, here the design manager or all the group that are involved along with the design management system, they have to take in consideration the idea of bringing the know-how along with the design code that are brought from outside in order to discuss and negotiate within the missing gap the possibility for the actor to cooperate together. That is the sense once we try to operate in a country such as Cambodia. It's an rapid transformations. The regulations and the frameworks are in complete revisions each day. But on the other sense, is it important to consider the flexibility of these regulations because the fast growth of Cambodia, because the fast growth of the regions and so on. And therefore, we have to be able to understand that in that sense, we might play as a consultant, as a scholars, for example, in my case, an important role in the definitions of this framework, given the possibility in Cambodia of this highly field for large field for negotiation, and on the other sense, an open society to what are our contributions. Thank you, and I will leave the floor to the next panel.
Thank you, Dr. Carlos.